let's get started. Diane, thank you for doing this for us. We are thrilled that you are here again.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm just going to share the screen and bring up. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to talk about this evening is ranked choice voting. Get it loaded here. Give it a second. And I think the first message I really want to communicate to everybody is that we want everybody to understand that this is not something that crazy new and different. That ranked choice voting is something that actually we do every day of our lives. And to kind of demonstrate this, I want you to just sort of imagine what happens when you and a bunch of friends or the family decide to share a pizza. You're actually using ranked choice voting because you might decide, you know what, my favorite pizza is a mushroom pizza. And that's when I go for pizza, I want mushrooms on my pizza. But it could be that the people you're going with, they're like all about plain cheese pizza. And you can be perfectly happy with plain cheese pizza. It might be your second choice, but you're perfectly happy with it. And you're willing to go along and share that pizza when it's plain cheese and give up the mushrooms. And this is really, I mean, it sounds silly, but it's actually exactly the same mental exercise we go through when we think about ranked choice voting. Another example was actually given to me by one of our college interns who, upon hearing this presentation, said, yeah, you know, it's like when you go into CVS and you got to decide what toothpaste you want. You know, your favorite is Crest with Scope, but Colgate is on sale and Colgate can be my second choice and I'm just as happy with Colgate. So really, that's ranked choice voting in a nutshell. Interestingly, though, and we want to emphasize this when we spread the word about ranked choice voting, you're never going to rank something that you would never be happy with. So in the pizza example, for me, that's going to be anchovies. There is no way I am ever going to vote or rank anchovies on my pizza. And so we want to communicate that you rank the choices that you can live with. You don't rank things that you could never live with. Okay, so that sort of sets the stage for what ranked choice voting is. Now, obviously, up until now, most elections, you got to choose one candidate, single choice voting. With ranked choice voting, which is only going to be in New York City, only for the primary and for the special elections that have already happened, you can rank up to 5 candidates in order of preference. And that's important to remember, up to 5. You don't have to do 5, but you get up to 5. Other municipalities who are using ranked choice voting, specifically Oakland, California, has 3 rankings. You could do up to 3, but New York decided to allow up to 5. Benefits, let's talk about that. Ranked choice voting gives you more say in who's going to get elected. It keeps your ballot in the game longer, and I'm going to explain that in a few minutes. But most importantly, it allows you, as Carol was saying, to be strategic in deciding how you're going to rank the candidates. And knowing the issues, focusing on the issues allows you to do this. So for example, you might decide that candidate A has all the same issue positions that you agree with. Everything about candidate A is exactly where you stand on all the issues. That's probably going to be your first choice. Candidate B might represent your interests on just about everything. Maybe there's one issue that you might disagree with candidate B on. That candidate is probably somebody you can live with. That can be your second choice. So as you're deciding how to rank your candidates, it really makes the voter pay attention to the issues. And that's really important, and it's good for the voter. It's good to allow our voice to be heard. We're going to get to the idea of your ballot being in the game longer in a couple of minutes. But I want to go on to this other benefit of civility and less negativity in campaigning. Now, this is something that the candidates in other places where they've been using ranked choice voting for a while, so I specifically mentioned Oakland, California, also other communities in the East Bay area of California, and also Minneapolis, Minnesota is using ranked choice voting. What the candidates there have figured out is, wait a minute, if I'm really nasty to another candidate, if I'm candidate A and I'm really nasty to candidate B, and the voter was going to put me as maybe second choice or third choice, if I'm being nasty to another candidate, that might influence a voter to move me down a few slots or not even rank me if I'm bad mouthing or trash talking a candidate that they like. The other interesting thing that happened is, and I actually saw an example of this in Oakland, California, where candidates are actually forming coalitions. And you'll have candidate A, B, and C doing a commercial together on television, expressing their views, but expressing it as a coalition of candidates, saying things like, I could be your first choice, and candidate B could be your second choice, and candidate C could be your third choice. And it elevates the three of them, let's say, so that they have a much greater chance of success in the election. So that's something that's going to be interesting to watch for here in New York. I'm not sure that they have figured it out yet, the New York City candidates, because this is the first time around, but I think it's going to be really interesting to watch for, to see if we notice this as they get better at it. The other interesting thing, and this is firsthand information, it just so happens I have a daughter and son-in-law who live in Oakland, California, and have been voting ranked choice voting for several years now in their city council election. And my son-in-law, who is a social studies teacher, said to me, it makes the voter pay attention to more than their first choice. Because think about it, when we go into an election season and we're in the habit of picking a candidate. And once we pick a candidate, we stop listening. And his point was, when you have the option of ranked choice voting, you don't stop listening, because another candidate and another candidate and another candidate might be expressing positions that you can support. So it really makes the voter stay tuned in for a longer period of time, which can only be good. Another advantage to ranked choice voting is this idea of less vote splitting. And this is a very interesting concept. Frequently, as we all know in New York City, when we have, let's say, a city council race a primary, that could have 9 candidates or more running for a city council seat. Very often in communities, it really matters to members of the community that somebody representing that community get that seat. But you could have 3 candidates representing that community. What used to happen was it would split the vote. You could only vote for one of them. So let's say there were 3 Latino candidates running in a particular race. And in that community, the people felt like, you know what, we want somebody representing us. We want a Latino person in this seat. And so what happened then was the votes would get split up. Some would vote for candidate A, candidate B, candidate C, and it might turn out that you are not represented by who you want. With ranked choice voting, you can first choice, second choice, third choice, and you can have a greater chance of somebody representing your community get that seat. So that's another interesting little thing that could very well happen. Okay, so This is, as Carol was saying, this is going to be implemented. It has already been used in the special elections in February and March successfully. And for the primary, as Carol mentioned, it's only going to be for the mayor, public advocate, controller, borough presidents, and city council. Because, and I know I mentioned this when we got together last time, because the district attorney comes out of the judicial branch, the district attorneys are not going to be using ranked choice voting. I actually skipped a screen here. Let me go back to this. When we decided on ranked choice voting, it was on the ballot. I'm sure many of you remember in 2019, turnout was, of course, ridiculously low. But of those people who did turn out and who did vote, almost 75% of New Yorkers supported this on the ballot. So that's why we have it now, is because of that ballot initiative. Okay, now we get to the fun part. How do we actually do this? And this is really interesting. And I think it's extremely important that those of us who are reaching out into different communities can communicate this important information. We get to rank, as I said, up to 5 candidates. So if I'm the voter, and this is what very similar to what our ballot is going to look like. In this particular scenario, candidate B is my first choice. He or she represents everything that I believe in. This is my strongest candidate. Candidate C is like right there. I can live with candidate C. Same thing, candidate A for my third choice, candidate E for my fourth choice, candidate D for my fifth choice. All of these candidates I can be happy with, I can live with. The one thing we need to warn people about is this is not a legitimate ballot. You can't say candidate B is my choice, my only choice, and I'm going to rank candidate B straight across choice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't do that. If you vote in person, the machine will spit this ballot out because it's not a legitimate ballot. Our concern is if somebody is voting absentee and fills in a ballot this way, then it's very stressful because then the ballot has to be cured, has to go back to the voter, and that whole process of how do you cure a ballot. And yes, it can be done, but it's very stressful. And we're really trying to avoid that for our voters. So to get this message out, you can vote for one candidate for each ranking, okay? Similarly, this is not a legitimate ballot. So in this case, the voter couldn't make up their mind. They loved candidate B, they loved candidate C, and so they ranked both candidates B and C as a first choice. You can't do that. The machine will spit this out, and again, the voter will have to redo the ballot, which is, not a huge deal when you are at the poll site, but it can become a big deal if somebody is voting absentee. So we really want to get the word out. You've really got to vote one rank per candidate, up to 5. Okay, now let's talk about the actual counting. Here's the way it works. This is the law. Let's imagine all the votes come in, everything's been counted, and then we are ready to count, to really count the ballots and see what's going on. So the first thing that happens, and this will be reported publicly, all the candidates' first choice rankings are going to be reported. So if you look at this particular scenario, candidate A won 16% of all the first choice rankings. Candidate B won 54% of all the first choice rankings. Candidate C, 22%, candidate D, 8%. Now in this scenario, because candidate B won 50% plus 1, more than 50% plus 1 votes, candidate B wins this election. It is over. It does not need to go to the rounds. And we'll talk about the rounds in a minute. If one candidate wins more than 50% plus 1 of first rankings, election is over, this candidate wins. Okay, that's scenario number 1. Scenario number 2, of course, much more light. What happened? I think I lost yep. Okay, wait, here we go. Okay. Scenario number 2, which is of course much more likely when we have God knows how many candidates in the race when it's all said and done, more likely this is going to happen. All the votes come in, first choice rankings are counted, and in this scenario, candidate A has won 27% of all the rankings, first choice. Candidate B has won 39% of the first choice ranking. Candidate C, 22%. Candidate D, 12%. Notice nobody is at 50% plus 1. The minute this happens, we begin what's called the rounds. In order for the rounds to happen, we look at the lowest vote getter from the first round vote, from the first ranking. Obviously, it's candidate D. Candidate D is now eliminated. Now, here's where, when I said before about your ballot stays in play longer with ranked choice voting, this is when it starts to happen. So watch what happens. Candidate D was eliminated because candidate D had the lowest total of first place votes. Everybody who voted for candidate D as their first choice, their ballot is still in play because now it goes to their second choice. So let's imagine I'm the voter and I voted for candidate D as my first choice. And let's imagine I voted for candidate C as my second choice. My ballot now goes to candidate C's pile. Okay, so I get my second choice. Other people who voted for candidate D, maybe they voted for candidate A as their second choice, or maybe they voted for candidate B as their second choice. Whatever your second choice was, that's where your ballot goes. So your ballot is still in play. Whereas if you only had voted for candidate D, your vote counted. Your vote definitely counted for candidate D, but candidate D is now out. So your ballot is sitting in the pile on that side of the table. Okay. So now we still have to go to another round. And in this situation, I look and see, oh, candidate C is now the lowest vote getter. So now we eliminate candidate C. Everybody who voted for candidate C as their first choice, they now get their second choice. Or in the case that I was using, if I was the voter and candidate D was my first choice, candidate C was my second choice, I now get my third choice. So maybe my third choice was candidate A, and some people maybe had candidate B. Now the rounds continue just like this, where the lowest vote getter is eliminated and the votes of the voter are reassigned to their next choice. This has to keep going until there are only 2 candidates left. Now you might ask, well, what happens if somebody gets more than 50% when there's more than 2 candidates left? Doesn't matter. It has to go to 2 candidates. That's the law. And the reason for that is it gives everybody's vote longer to circulate to let the decision-making happen. So let's imagine that we've been through a few rounds and now we're down to the final 2 candidates. Candidate B, who had a certain percentage of first choice votes, certain percentage of second choice votes, certain percentage of third place votes, and probably fourth place and fifth place votes, has won this election with 58% of the votes. And that's how it works. Now, the recent special election that was held in March actually went 9 rounds to get to this point. So I just did a simple scenario. This one is straight out of the Board of Elections website. just to give you the sense of it. But the rounds can definitely continue until we are left with 2 candidates. Okay, now, one thing to remember, and we want to really warn people about this can take a little bit of time. Obviously, we know in New York from previous elections that we don't even start counting absentee ballots until 7 days after the election, because people can postmark their absentee ballot on election day, and we have to give it time to arrive at Board of Elections. So the counting won't even begin until 7 days after the election, as it's always been. But then if you have to go through, let's say, 9 rounds, and of course it's all computer, but still it could take time. But it's going to be totally transparent, and you will be able to see how all of the percentages change, how or the actually total votes change as people get their first, second, third choice votes. So I want to, before I go on to talk about other issues with the election, I just want to pause here for any questions about ranked choice voting. Any thoughts, questions? Yes, go ahead.
My question is, you don't have to vote for 5, right?
Correct, correct.
And what is the difference? What does it mean different? You know, is there any difference in meaning as to whether you vote for 3 or 5, let's say?
I would say it's strictly strategic, that the more, and again, I'm using the expression, the more candidates you can live with, the longer your ballot stays on the table. So the louder your voice is as a voter. But obviously, if you look at the list of candidates and you say, there's only 3 of them that I could support, then that's all you're going to vote for. So it's totally your choice. You could choose to only vote for 1. But again, it gives us the opportunity to look at the candidates and say, you know what? I can live with this one. I can live with this one, and I can live with this one and with that one. So it's totally your choice as a voter. Other thoughts or questions? Okay, and I don't see any other hands up. So what I wanted to do now was just briefly, Carol had asked me to just sort of review some important information about the upcoming election so that everybody really, has all the information. First of all, I want to direct everybody to the Board of Elections website, vote.nyc. I've been checking it very regularly. Now, I don't know if you all got yours, but I got my primary information and I got my FastPass in the mail. Did everybody else get theirs yet? Yeah. So this, of course, is really going to help when you go to vote in person, because all you need to do is you just need to show your FastPass and it just scans you in. The little brochure is also really important because it does give you, in several languages, it gives you, the calendar of dates and other important information. So this is really handy. If you go to vote.nyc, you know what, let me just go there for a second. I can show you. Interestingly, they have some good information about ranked choice voting. And you can actually go in, and if you're not sure about dates or, eventually, they haven't put it up yet, but they will be posting the sample ballots and things like that. The other thing that they have done is, here, let me show you this. The special election that happened in Queens, here are the rankings. So you can see that the rankings actually went 6 rounds, and you could see round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it shows you first choice, and then it gets added on how many more votes they got, how many more votes they got in the 3rd round, the 4th round. So it's pretty clear. Of course, embarrassingly low voter turnout, we can all say. But you can definitely go into this website and take a look at this data and see how the rounds actually work. Also, I recommend our website, lwvnyc.org. We have a lot of trainings coming up, and also we'll be posting all the important information for you also. Some important dates, and this is important. Anybody voting absentee, it's important to note that even though the date listed is May 28th, that means it has to be in the BOE office on May 28th. So if you're going to be doing voter registration drives for your communities, make sure that you have your voter registration drive well before this date, because everything has to be there by May 28th. So, early May would be your latest, I would say, if you're going to do a voter registration drive. Early voting, the dates are Saturday, June 12th to Sunday, June 20th. And to remind folks that their early voting site is not necessarily the same site where they vote on election day. And you can get that information at the Board of Elections website. And I would definitely check that every now and then, because those have been known to change mid-election season. So I would definitely, when you go into the BOE website, vote.nyc, and you look for it, it says like poll site locator, check and see, and just remind people that, where you're voting early may not be where you're voting if you choose to vote on June 22nd. The question about who gets to vote in the primary is really important, because in New York City, this is a Democratic primary. And because New York State is a closed primary state, only members of the Democratic Party can vote in this primary. Now, kind of a wacky part of New York State election law is that if you are already a registered voter and you are not a registered Democrat, in order to change your affiliation to Democrat, you had to have done it by Valentine's Day, February 14th. This year, the governor gave you 2 extra days till February 16th. But this is the law, it's February 14th. However, if you are a new voter, you can register as a Democrat and vote in the primary, as long as you're registered by May 28th. So kind of a crazy law, but it's what we're dealing with, and we would love to see that changed. And of course, we're working at it, but really important. So new registrants can select a party and vote in the primary. An established registrant is tied to whatever they selected previously. And this is really important, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just had a question when you're done with that thought.
Oh, okay. So the end of my thought was that when you are registering voters, and especially nowadays when there's such a, I would say, such animosity on the part of many people about political parties, to remind people, we live in New York State, we live in New York City. If you want your voice heard in New York City, let's be honest, you have to be a member of the major political party in order to vote in the primary, because in New York City, that's where the power is. And that's where your voice is going to be heard. So we are a totally nonpartisan organization, but we understand and we recognize that in New York City, that's where the power is. By the time we get to the general election, you will have lost out on choices that could be 22 people that you lost out on a choice for. So I'm sorry, go ahead. What was your thought?
Carol Crossan just had the question about having not received her fast pass from the Board of Election and whether she should be concerned, or when it's too late to get that.
Okay, so first of all, I would say make sure that you're a registered Democrat, because the only people who are getting these are registered Democrat or registered Republicans are also getting it.
I just got it today, so I wouldn't.
They're being sent out, kind of in rolling patterns. I wouldn't be worried about it yet. Wait and see. Mine came, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Mine came actually on Saturday. So, I guess it just depends where you live. So just kind of watch your mail. You should definitely have it within the next couple of weeks, I would imagine. And it's no big deal if you don't get it. Remember, this is not voter ID. This is not required to vote at all. All you'll need to do is find out your poll site by going to poll site locator on vote.nyc and show up. And to remind people, this is not voter ID, and that's really important. This is just a helpful way to make it go faster, but it is not required to vote. So don't be concerned if you don't get it in the mail. Also, the other thing that we've been telling people is it kind of looks like junk mail, right? So, just kind of watch for it. And when you see it, it's going to say primary election on it. So just to remind people that it isn't junk mail, to open it up. Other questions?
Yeah, I last year when I voted, I got this dual pass thing, that one was a keychain thing and one was just a
Yeah.
regular card.
Yeah, that's what this is. So this is the
So
keychain.
that's the same thing that they're sending now?
Yeah, so this is it, actually. Actually, I'll tear mine off for you so you
I
can
got
see.
it last
Yeah.
year, so I have one, in other words.
Yeah, so this is the new one for the
You need-
primary.
You need a new one for each election, right?
Well, the thing
That's
is,
what I'm asking, yeah.
it depends, because if your poll site is changed this time around, you don't want to use your old one and show up at the wrong poll site. So I would say, and again, it's not required to have it with you when you go vote. But, for example, on mine, it gives me my poll site, which happens to be Robert Wagner Middle School. But,
It gave me my poll site
yeah.
too.
okay, I'll see you there.
No, not at your place. Mine is on East 88th Street.
Oh, okay. So in other words, that happens to be my poll site this time, and it was last time also, but the time before that, it wasn't. So, I would say wait for your new one. Don't assume that your old one is correct, because I also work as a poll worker, and there are many, many people who show up with really old voting cards and say, but I voted here since 1978. I'm like, yeah, but it's changed. So don't rely on the old card. But again, it's not required to show up with it. Other thoughts? Terry, are you raising your hand? No, okay. Okay, well then, great. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Terry. Oh, you're on mute.
How does this differ from the old proportional representation when we had election to school boards many years ago?
The only thing that I could compare it to is what used to be the runoff elections, right? Where in order for a candidate to win, they needed a certain percentage. If they didn't get that percentage, then they would have a whole nother election. So ranked choice voting is really a way to eliminate the cost and the aggravation, really, of multiple runoff elections. That was the intent. And also, to give people choice. And because so many municipalities around the country are using it effectively, that's why they decided to do it. I really can't speak to the old school board elections. I wasn't in the city at that time. But it's really, I would say, compare it to the old runoffs where, remember when nobody got the correct percentage, and then a couple months later, you'd have a whole nother election cycle. And so now that's not going to happen anymore.
Saves a lot of money.
It saves a ton of money, a ton. of money.
Diane, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I don't know. I hope I'm not alone in this, but I've had a really hard time keeping up with all the candidates and their positions. And I feel very overwhelmed to be responsible for being able to pick 5 people, even 3 people,
Mhm.
or 4 people. Is there any place, any website that has any kind of breakdown on the issues per candidate?
Yep. I'm glad you asked that question.
Good.
Ours is not up and running yet, but the League of Women Voters nationally and each local league, we maintain something called Vote 411. And what Vote 411 does for you, it's an app, or you can just go to the website, Vote 411. It's not up and running yet, but it will be shortly. And what it will do is you can click on the candidates and it gives you, because we are nonpartisan, it gives you the candidates' positions from the candidate's own mouth, so to speak. There are other websites that are doing the same thing. Ballotpedia is doing the same thing. And even I think the Board of Elections, when they get theirs up and running, will also have a link, and you could go to the candidates' websites and read for yourself what the candidates are saying. And I think it's interesting that you say that, because it does put responsibility on the voter for us to really, we're not voting for people because, we like the style of their dress we're voting for people because of the positions they're taking on the issues. And so to be able to go to these websites or to go to their websites and look at what they're, I would say my advice is, don't try to look at all their positions on everything that they've ever said. Focus on the ones that are really like the deal maker for you, So if the deal maker for you is this person's position on, policing or on housing or on taxation or whatever the issue is, that's your issue, I would just click, okay, where do they stand on this? Where does this one stand on that? And just kind of do a check on like one issue that you really, that is the deal breaker for you. And then maybe a second issue that's a deal breaker for you. And rather than trying to see like what their entire platform is.
Right, okay.
And it's very interesting. One of our interns right now is actually getting everything ready for our Vote 411. And, she's a high school senior, and it's been fascinating for her because she's like, boy, some of these candidates, they're just not saying anything about what they believe. And I'm like, you're learning something.
And when is that coming out again, the vote?
It'll be soon. Actually, we just had a meeting about it today. We really had to wait until when the dust settles and we get so the candidates are, it's beginning to settle out now. So we should be able to get that up soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And like those other sites.
I just want to say that we dropped in the chat something that the news publication, The City, made.
The City, yes.
Which
They
is
did-
called Meet Your Mayor, and it's kind of like a quiz, and you say what's important to you, and they match you with the candidate. So
Yes.
I'm not saying you should vote based on how the city quiz comes out, but it is a helpful way to sort of get to feel out some of the candidates. And they
Yes.
can tell you who you're most similar to, and then you can go to their website and see if you think you're similar. But it's
Exactly.
kind of just a different way to get around
What's the
some of
website? What is the
It's
website for that?
it's in the chat if you can see that, but it's called thecity.nyc, and it's the Meet Your Mayor quiz.
And the City is actually an online city newspaper that you can subscribe to for free. And they're doing a lot around civics. And we actually participated, the program that I did with you guys last time on Who Makes New York City Run, we did it for them. And the author who wrote the book, Adrian Kivelson, led the discussion, and it was very cool. So the City, they are definitely doing really good things around educating New Yorkers about the candidates. Thank you, Joanne, for bringing that up.
Mike just put the link to The City in the chat. If anybody doesn't get it in their inbox, I highly recommend that you do every day. It's not a long read. It's not a long read.
Simple read, but
It's a lot of the people who left the Daily News. They sort of started their own online news outlet. All right, we're getting close to, it's like 7:47, so we're getting close to our hour mark. Anything else any other questions anybody has? We have a couple of announcements too.
Go for it.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you. for all-
Thank you, Diane. Great
Diane.
job.
Thank you. It was fabulous.